Hi there everyone, Lars here with another Writer's Dive into the fantastical world of Dungeons & Dragons, brought to you by Camille's Harem. Not just a podcast for novice writers by novice writers, but also a YouTube channel by novice writers for novice writers. Because writing is an adventure, it's more fun with friends. And today I want to talk about Murderhobos. No, I am not referring to the incredible cult classic Hobo with a Shotgun. I am talking about those poor souls who leave behind their homes and families and walk the wide expanses of the earth, seeking the pleasure of murdering everything that moves. To my fellow writers out there, no, the murder hobo is very different from the angsty boys and girls out there who wallow in the darkness and depression of their own lives, which grants them somehow unfathomable protagonist powers. Stay in your corner, Kirito! In the world of RPGs, the murder hobos murder and loot, leaving a swath of destruction in their wake that would make even General Sherman swoon. But because of that trait, murder hobos have been the bane of many games and stories. They just don't care about the plot, the characters, the lore, or anything else for that matter other than murder. Oi! You just killed the princess that we were supposed to save! What were you thinking? I thought we were here to murder goblins. Looks like a goblin to me. The wizard was about to give us a quest. Why did you cut off his head? Why not? Wizards suck. You just murdered the entire town. Everyone will be hunting us down now. Excellent. Because these peasants didn't have nearly enough loot. Alright guys. This is the extra-dimensional castle of the vampire overlord. We can't just rush in, Leroy Jenkins! Now, some of you might just write this off as simply a Dungeons & Dragons problem, or that it is the mentality of video game grinders. But it goes beyond that. Let's take, for example, the Legend of Zelda game Breath of the Wild. It has a huge and intricate story, with a wide world that begs to be explored. The game developers, however, made it possible for players to speed through everything by fighting through the 4 dungeons and facing Ganondorf in rapid succession. For gamers who pride themselves on speed runs, this is all fine and dandy, but a lot of gamers, hell-bent murder hobos, looking to finish the game quickly, they just slaughtered their way through, finished the game in a day, and as a result, the game was quickly branded as too easy and not enough fun. You have all of these players saying, well, I beat the game in one day. What's the point now? Throw the controllers, go find something else. Have you freaking looked at the Breath of the Wild? It is a massive world, jam-packed full of stories, characters, clues to an intricate history of what has happened, a plot, and everything else. But that is lost on the person who just murders their way through the game like this is Super Mario. Now, a computer game is indeed one thing. A tabletop game where stories are shared and made together in a group or in the pages of a book, the murder hobo becomes a terror. They overthrow plot lines, kill important characters, distract the audience, cause nuisances, and because they're so good at killing, taking them down is difficult. That is, unless the almighty hand of the dungeon master, or the writer, swoops down and eliminates the murder hobo in their bloody tracks. Or is there more to it? I personally think that there is. And I think that the murder hobo actually isn't given the credit that he or she deserves. With the exception of just one game, every D&D campaign I have led, there's always been a murder hobo involved. And what I have learned is that they can become very engaging instruments and players to the overall plot. So to explain myself, we have to accept that not all murder hobos are alike. The first category is the most prominent. People who just want to kill, kill, kill. All they're here for is to slaughter, and nothing but death will deter them. The second group of murder hobos consists of new players who think that the game is all about completing an objective, so they make a powerful character who's just meant to slaughter their way through every single obstacle. The third group consists of characters whose stories are that they are just done with everything, and they only see murder as the viable option, the one viable option to solve all of their problems, because it seems to be the only thing working. Examples of these kinds of characters can include the enigmatic villains like Dracula in the Castlevania series, or the Drifter Smith from Shoot 'em Up, who's just literally a murdering hobo, or Guts from Berserk. Seriously, if you take away Dracula's heartache, Smith's list of pet peeves, John Wick's dog, and Guts' journey of suffering and redemption, they are nothing more than murder hobos. Okay, if you take away John Wick's dog, he becomes a murder hobo. Just give him back his dog, and everything's going to be fine. Here's the thing, all three categories have their place. Starting with the last and ending with the first, let me explain. The third category of murder hobos are incredible characters because of what they can become. Dracula goes from a rampaging villain to the heart of the show's second season as he grapples with depression. Guts, for his part, eventually becomes a man who puts others before himself and fights to save his own humanity, as well as the lives of his companions. John Wick seeks normalcy in a life that refuses to let him move on, and Smith gets his family back, in a manner of speaking. There is a character arc for each and every one of them that fits them. Some of these character arcs are deep, some of them are shallow, but the fact is that it exists and it makes these characters and their journeys of death meaningful. Now, the second group of murder hobos are people who can grow. Their murderous intent is the starting point, and they evolve from there. When I ran my very first game as a dungeon master, my sister played in the group, and her character was totally a murder hobo. She ate people! Even the good guys! But as the game went on, her character developed relationships with others and learned how to strategize. So as the story went on, she began to take things from a more intellectual and personal angle rather than simply run in with her frying pan. Because yeah, she had a frying pan and would murder people with it. Instead of using her frying pan to smash people's heads in, she would first try diplomacy, a joke, or think things through a little bit more. She learned as we went on and discovered that really it was more fun and more fulfilling to do things other than just slaughter. And I will say this, even the first group of murder hobos has its place. In another game, I betted on the murder hobo plunging ahead so hard and fast that he would never question if what he was doing was actually very wrong. Yes, murder is wrong, but it can become even more wrong with the right kinds of fixings. So he got his kills, he upended an entire kingdom, and realized only too late that he had become the manipulated pawn of the real bad guy, giving up his free will and just becoming an arbiter of death, loyal to his new overlord. The murder hobo player had gone from a jubilant victor to a resigned slave, and it was really interesting to see that the lesson actually did sink in. It's like, oh, I did this. I was just having fun. Oh, crud. And that is the key to managing murder hobos. While they seemingly exist solely to ruin the plot, vis-a-vis endless slaughter, they can be molded into an element of your storytelling. Granted, in the middle of an RPG, this can be tricky because sometimes you are dealing with someone who is working solely to upend the entire story and just derail it. And so, yes, that sucks, and you just have to figure if you're going to eject them from the game or kill them within the game. As a dungeon master, it's up to you. But when it comes to writing a story, when we take this idea of murder hobos away from RPGs and put it instead onto the written word, it becomes a little bit different. Murder hobos can be utilized as amazing characters. I've already referenced Guts, so we can see that just beyond movies and video games, we can take a murder hobo and make him into a very deep and interesting character. I have my own example of this. You see, I started a story about 2 years before Camille's Harem ever became a thing, And in this story, I had planned for a murder hobo type character. He was this young, poor man who had become possessed by this evil sword. His village was attacked. His father was caught in the fight and couldn't make it back to the house. The son, in desperation to help his father out, rushed into his dad's room, took the sword that his father had told him he should not use, and pulled it from its sheath. However, this particular sword was possessed by an evil spirit, and whoever used it had to have a very strong sense of will and a very strong sense of character in order to bend the evil powers of the sword to their will and not become possessed. The young man unfortunately became possessed by using this sword and became essentially a murder hobo as he slaughtered not only the villains who were attacking his village, but everyone else in his village. And then from there he just wandered about the earth, killing and killing, until he was captured by this evil wizard who wanted to see if he could use the powers of this wicked sword to his own advantage. However, the young man broke himself out of prison like a boss and proceeded to murder his way through the castle until he found the king's beautiful daughter, and it was love at first sight. Boom! Suddenly he awakens a little bit, and now there's this warring conflict within himself, and he grabs the princess and rushes out, murdering his way through the city until he escapes into the woods, where he then met the third main character, who was this Amazonian warrior who was out for revenge. It was an interesting story. However, the problem is this. This is actually where the murder hobo derailed a written story. I was having a whole lot of fun writing the story, and up until I got to that point, because then I realized this is now all about the murder hobo. And with this sword, he's pretty unstoppable. What is the challenge right here? So he's got love at first sight, he's kind of awakening a little bit, but it just feels super rushed. And I ended up just kind of falling apart. I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do with the story anymore. I knew it was not where it should be, and I gave up. I wasn't very confident in myself at that time. I was not a very confident writer, and I was so loath to do editing. I was afraid of what I was going to find. I would see all of my imperfections, and I would be super embarrassed. Even if no one else read this, I was going to be embarrassed beyond all belief, and I would just see this horrible story that was going nowhere, so I just let it die. I dropped it, and I didn't pick it back up. If I were to go back now and face that monster that I had created, I would not let the murder hobo escape with the princess. But I would still have him break out of the palace and see her and experience that love at first sight and feel that strange conflict of emotions, the sword that is possessing him and turning him into this killing machine. But now these thoughts of, wow, that girl's beautiful. I can't kill her. Who is she? I want to get to know her. And then like his frustration, then just cleave his way out of the castle and go run and hide in the woods, where he would then meet the Amazonian warrior who is out for revenge. And during this time, he tries to then grapple with his emotions, and the Amazonian would be like, you know what, this guy looks like he could help me out in my quest for revenge, because he's got this possessed sword, he fights like a demon, that's pretty awesome, I'm going to use him. So she starts this business-like relationship with him, and then realizes that, whoa, this guy's going through quite a bit of conflict, but decides, out of her being a good person and everything like that, that she's going to help him out. So here we then have a budding relationship between these two characters right here, and the murder hobo begins to go through a period of change without throwing in the beautiful damsel who is going to change everything. And as a result, I could then keep the princess then at the castle, where because of this murder hobo who's just wrecked the castle, she then begins to investigate what actually happened. And then she realizes that the wizard is evil, that her father's wizard is evil, and that he's attempting to do something terrible. And so she would investigate, and she would then become this foil for the wizard. Thereby, I developed 3 different characters in their own way, and I give the murder hobo a significant arc that isn't just based around, I've got this hot girl, and I will give up this evil sword to be with her, but instead let him discover that for his own and work through it, and eventually over time find other reasons to let go of the sword or to bend its power to his will so that way he can protect others. By doing that, it would be a much better story. Granted, it still needs a lot of work because it was a wreck of a story. But in any case, that's what I would do, and that's how I could take a murder hobo that I wrote and turn him into a fully fleshed out character who helps propel the story. So you see, murder hobos aren't inherently bad, just difficult to handle. Alright, that's going to do it for me. If you want more writing advice, please go check out our podcast, Camille's Harem, found on Podbean, iTunes, and Google Play. We also have writing exercises over our Pinterest page and discussions over at our subreddits. And you can always help us find terrible fanfics to do epic readings of for your enjoyment. Please send us links to those terrible fanfics. It saves at least a little bit of our souls. Please. And that's all for me for now. So until the next video, y'all, tschüss.